Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing good. So in my today's session, I'm going to cover the Azure architecture. So what is the best place to start with? Microsoft has provided this particular link, basically a map-based approach to understand how the Azure infrastructure has been set up across the globe. So I'm going to make use of this to understand how basically this Azure architecture spans basically or how they have implemented across the globe, guys. Okay, so let's start with this. Okay, so let me switch to the map mode. Okay, both are possible. So this is pretty convenient for me. So as you would see, a very good presence of infrastructure across the globe we would see in this map, guys. So what I'm going to do is in order to have a simple interpretation of this infrastructure, okay, I'm going to remove some of the information from this region. So I don't want networking and I don't want sustainability projects which Microsoft supports for the time being on the map. So that's enough. Let's start with this. Okay. So the Azure architecture, at the top of Azure architecture, the first thing comes is a geography. Okay, so I will maximize a little. Geography is basically a country. So if I click on this diamond mark over here, so India geography. Okay, so at the top level, it is a geography which sits in the picture. Okay, so an Azure geography is typically a country, guys. Okay. Yeah, it has a boundary as every has a boundary. It has its boundary. Okay. And it is driven by the government and national laws. Okay. So if Microsoft want to set up, okay, the Microsoft Azure infrastructure into my country, definitely there are some boundaries. Okay, in order to store the data and transmit the data. Okay, there are a lot of data privacy rules will apply. Okay, and the data transit rules will apply, and apart from that there will be a lot of government and national laws associated with that. Okay, so all these factors will drive when Azure infrastructure is set up for any geography. Okay, and moreover, a geography helps to meet shared regulations and compliances also. Okay, so there will be some shared regulations associated inside the countries, okay, which the service provider and the government both has to support. Okay, and data should reside within a geography. Okay, so that's what. So if we want to make, if the Indian enterprises or Indian government or Indian army, okay, if they want to make use of the Azure cloud, so they have a strict requirements that their data needs to be stored within a geography. Okay, the data should reside within a geography. So all these kinds of stuffs will comes into picture basically. Okay, so another important factor is, okay, there are four models associated with a cloud, right, guys? It's a public, private, hybrid, and then sovereign. Okay, so if I want to set up a public cloud, okay, inside India geography, then we also need to check how other countries are comfortable with storing their data inside our country's boundaries, basically inside our country, I would say. Okay, are they comfortable with creating or having their infrastructure or their enterprise related technology infrastructure set up inside my country specific Azure cloud? Okay, are they ready to, or are they agreed to store their data into my country? Okay, so all these stuffs will comes into picture. Okay, which basically happens through an enterprise agreements. Okay, when it comes to public cloud. Okay, so the most important stuff is that the enterprises should be comfortable enough to store their data and their infrastructure associated with their technology. Okay, so this is it. And then most important thing comes is when it comes to yeah, the sovereign clouds. Okay, sovereign cloud is a type of cloud model where the cloud is specifically used by the country itself. Trust me, No enterprises outside of the countries can make use of that cloud for their usages, for their technological usage. No, only the enterprises within this country, that's my country, India, and the government or the armies, okay, the only these people can basically make use of that cloud. That's it, and it is hosted inside my country only, and moreover, it is set up using a private network. Okay, it is not going to use any public network, and it is not at all accessible by any of the outside countries. Okay, and also this kind of cloud is most of the time accessed by the authorized personals of my countries only. Okay, only the citizens of the India only can access that cloud. Okay, and that too on the basis of needs. Okay, so this is how basically goes all the regulations, policies, drives when setting up various models of clouds within a geography. Okay, that's just an introduction. That's what I wanted to explain over here. Okay, and one more important factor being is okay, most of the time Microsoft picks it based on a customer demand. Okay, now what happens is if a specific geography has a lot of awareness or made their choice of cloud as Microsoft Azure, and there is a huge market base and there is a more demand, only in such cases you would see that Microsoft will pick such countries, okay, for setting up their Azure infrastructure in that geography. At present, if I have a look at my country, there are already two Azure regions available and one is about to come. Can you see this? Okay, uh, dark gray circle over here, which means it's a upcoming. Yeah, so it's basically a upcoming region which is about to come for my country. Okay, so it all depends on the demand, okay, and based on the market base. Okay, that also plays a huge factor. Okay, huge role I would say basically. So if I see some other regions like Europe, can you see a lot of presence is there, a lot of regions is there. And if I go to United States of America, okay, yeah, I would see a lot of Azure regions are there already because there is a huge market base. Okay, there is a huge demand. Okay, so these are the factors which basically drive in order to set up, okay, Azure cloud in a geography. Okay, and as I said, a country can contain one or more Azure regions, as I already explained, based on the customer demand or the market base. Okay, so that's all about a region basically. Okay, so let me explain it. So for a easy illustration, I'm making use of MS Pen to show you how things basically comes into picture in the Azure architecture. So as I already explained, the first thing which sits is a geography. Okay, so that's why I'm representing that geography as the first container. Okay, so that's what we all discussed about a geography or a country basically. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, so inside a geography, the next level comes is a region. Okay, can you see here, guys? A central region and a South India region. Okay, so what is a region? A region is basically a part within a geography. Okay, a region is basically a part within geography like north, south, east, west, and central. And what is the use of dividing a geography into region is that we can basically set up the Azure infrastructure or the cloud into these regions and make them available to the all the users of the country, and most importantly the people who are near to that region. Okay, based on the proximity of the users. Okay, for example, the south users can very easily access this south region of Azure cloud, as well in the same way the north region people can very easily access the north region Azure setups or the Azure infrastructure. Okay, uh, that is the primary use of dividing a geography into various regions basically. Okay, so number of regions, again, the number of regions depends on the market size. Okay, so at present if I look at India, okay, based on our market size, we are currently having only two regions. One is either central India, another one is the South India, and one is about to come, which is called Indian South Central, because now the market base is slowly increasing. That's why Azure or Microsoft is planning to introduce a new region inside my country. Okay, so that's what a region is basically. Okay, so whenever we provision resources, so for example, if you would have seen the Microsoft's portal, the portal.azure.com, and whenever you create a resource, in that case, what happens, whatever region you are seeing here, you will be provided an option to select that region if you are pretty much near to that region. For example, I am sitting in Bangalore. Okay, so I am sitting in Bangalore. Okay, if I want to create a SQL server on Azure, okay, what I would do, I can safely select the South India region because this region is very near to me. Okay, that's why the access, okay, the resource access will be much faster compared to the Central India. Okay, so that is the basic idea, okay, of the regions, and customers will be provided that option to select the regions when they create resources, okay, in the portal, the portal.azure.com basically, whenever you create a resource. Okay, and yeah, a region contains one or more availability zones. Okay, so let me show you in a pictorial way. So this is a geography, guys. So what I'm going to do is now I will show you the region now, how a region basically looks like. Okay, if you take an example of India itself, this is India, the geography. Then at present, as per the map, India has three regions, right? Two regions, sorry, one is about to come. So I will draw only two for easy demonstration. Okay, now these are regions basically. Okay, region. So what I will call region, and the name is Central India. Okay, okay, guys. So if I take geography, my India geography, okay, so my country has at present two active regions. One is Central India, another one is South India. Okay, so this is how the architecture basically continues. Country, and then inside the country, the regions. Okay, and these regions basically contains one or more availability zones. Okay, what are availability zones basically? Okay, availability zones are the basically zones or the area where your data centers will be set up. Okay, so that I'm going to explain soon, but before that, let me cover one more important part over here. Okay, so let me start with the regional pairing now. Okay, so I explained about regions. So what is a regional pairing? Okay, regional pairing is basically a mechanism where two regions are paired, okay, in order to address the issues associated with the natural calamities or any kind of disasters. Okay, so Microsoft may tie regions into regional pairs. For example, Central India is paired to South India. Okay, and always remember, these are connected via dedicated low latency WAN links, okay, which have a latency less than 20 milliseconds. Okay, so that's how the pairing will happen. Basically, there should be some connection mechanism, right? So that connection is achieved using a dedicated low latency WAN links. Okay, the physical separation between these two regions, basically, okay, uh, most of the time it will be at least 300 miles, or I would say 485 kilometers somewhere. So regional pairing will only happen when these two regions are separated by 300 miles or 485 kilometers. So if I open this now, you would see, okay, so central India is paired with South India. So this regional pairing is only eligible or possible when there is a separation of at least 300 miles, which is there basically. Okay. So remember this. And these are connected through a low latency WAN links, and the latency is less than 20 milliseconds basically. Okay. So that's about this regional pairing. And one important stuff being, This is used for cross-region data replication for high resiliency. Okay, do remember regional pairing has been used to enable high resiliency. So due to some natural calamity or disaster, okay, if the south region is went down, then we should be able to continue the business from the central India. Okay, so that's why they say the cross region data replication for high resiliency. Okay, the data will be replicated across the regions. Okay, there is a support for disaster recovery scenarios also, as I already explained. Any one of them went down, another will comes into picture. Okay, and one important stuff is there is a concept of pairing, and this pairing can be unidirectional or bidirectional. In case of bidirectional pairing, what happens, the data from the entire data setup, whatever infrastructure, whatever you have, okay, that can be stored into central India, and whatever is there in the central India, all the data setup, okay, infrastructure setup can be stored into South India. Okay, when it happens in both way, it is called bidirectional. Okay, but when it happens only in one direction, for example, if if the central India is, this particular region is bigger than South India, okay, in that case only the pairing can happen from South India to central India, because central India's region is very big compared to South India. Okay, so that's why South India's uh, I would say all the infrastructure related information data can be easily set up in central India, but the reverse is not possible because the South India region is smaller compared to central India. Okay, that's why they say the pairing can be unidirectional or bidirectional. Okay, so that is the stuff. So if you click over here, see, in the region pairing, okay, you can very easily locate all this information, guys. Okay, so in the region pairing, we can get more details how this pairing has been done. Is it a unidirectional, bidirectional, cross-region disaster? All this information can be found over here. So that's all about regional pairing and regions. Now the most important thing is availability zones. Okay, the next layer in the Azure architecture, guys. Okay, as I already given a hint, availability zones are basically areas within a region. Okay, so what happened is we basically divided a geography into various regions: north, south, east, west, central. Now inside south, okay, in the south region, now how we are going to set up our Azure cloud, basically the infrastructure or the data centers, that is done using the concept of availability zones. So let me draw this quickly. Yeah, so as I explained, now we started with geography. The geography has been divided into regions like Central India, South India. Now, in Central India, okay, that is the city of Pune as per this document, this map over here. It is located in Pune. In Pune city, okay, how these availability zones are set up. Okay, so an availability zone is basically a area within a region, okay, which contains actual data centers, okay, which basically contain all the required necessary hardware, the building infrastructure, okay, all these stuffs in order to set up this Azure cloud. Okay, guys, so that's what a availability zone is. Okay, they are okay, they basically have a dedicated high performance network which whose latency is less than 2 milliseconds. Okay, see, inside a region we usually have one or more availability zones, okay, and these availability zones are connected to each other with a high performance network whose latency is less than 2 milliseconds. So due to any reason, any hardware failure, any kind of a disaster, if it went down, right, immediately it will switch back to other active availability zone, and that will take over and start functioning. Okay, and your all the datas basically, okay, all your data infrastructure, everything is replicated across the availability zones. Even one went down, another will take over and it will start functioning as it is, and users may not experience that also, because that happens so fast that it is in such a way that because they are connected with a very high performance network whose latency is less than 2 milliseconds, as a user we will never identify that itself, we can't see that glitch itself, so quickly it will basically switch to other availability zone in the background. Okay, so that's the care taken by the Microsoft itself. Okay, So the physical separation of this availability zone is 75 miles. Okay. So if you see, there are three zones in central India. So these three availability zones are separated with 75 miles or 120 kilometers apart. Okay. So the distance between them is 120 kilometers basically. Okay. So with these availability zones, as I explained, the replication of data basically. Okay. So there are two types of replication of data. One is zonal replication. Each availability zone basically, okay, uh, maintains at least three copies of your data. So availability zone one maintains three copy, two maintains three copy, three maintains three copy. This is called a zonal level. And another one is zone redundant. Basically, in that case, what happens, apart from your zone one maintaining three copies of your data, even your zone 2 also maintains the same three copies of data, and zone 3 also maintains three copies of data if it is configured. Okay, so while creating a resource, if you select the zone redundant replication, then your data is replicated across availability zones. Okay, that is the concept basically. Okay, so support for high availability against local failures. Okay, so whenever any local failure happens, maybe due to the cooling system, network failure, hardware failure, okay, they basically very fastly recover from that and they will start functioning. Okay, so that is basically the concept of availability zones. As I already explained, availability zone themselves contains one or more data centers, which I'm going to explain soon, guys. Okay, so each and every availability zone contains one or more data centers within them. So let me draw that. So as you would see, each availability zone contains one or more data centers. One important stuff, okay, you will never get the actual location details of a data center, okay, in this graph-based information. Can you locate the data center? No. Okay, due to security reasons, this information is not shared over here. Okay, we can see the regions basically, what region in this map, but we can't locate the exact data centers due to security reasons. So that's why you will never find that information over here. Okay, so availability zones can contain one or more data centers. Okay, and one important thing is that a region is called, okay, a region is called zone redundant. Okay, zone replication redundant, I would say. Sorry, yeah, zone redundant replication. Okay, an availability zone, or sorry, an region is called zone redundant replication replicable only when it has three zones. Okay, if a region contains three availability zones, then only it is zone redundant replication capable of. Okay, so South India, if you see, it has only two zones, so this is not zone redundant. It doesn't support the zone redundant replication, guys. Okay, so you can achieve the zonal replication within each availability zone. You can have three copies of your data, but you can't have the same data across the zones. But central India is zone redundant. Basically, it supports zone redundant replication. That's why whatever data you store in zone 1, that can be kept over in zone 2 as well as zone 3, and it can, and the number of copies can range for from 5 to 7 copies basically. Okay, so that is one stuff related to the zonal replication as well as the zone redundant replication. You can locate that information very easily. So if I click over here, we can identify, yeah, see, available with three zones, which means this is zone redundant replication. It supports zone redundant replication. Okay, whereas if you click on South India, see, nearest region with zones, so this doesn't support zone redundant replication. Okay, guys, so that's all about the zonal and zone redundant replication of the data basically. Okay, so now we will come to data centers. A data center is a physical housing in an Azure infrastructure. So a data center basically a physical building, guys. Okay, it has its own security personnel. Okay, the maintenance guys. Okay, the actual hardware being set up inside that building, cooling, everything. Okay, so a data center is a physical housing in an Azure infrastructure. Okay, Microsoft picks the location after thorough scrutiny. They do a lot of assessments, they do a lot of analysis, they will check the surrounding area for any natural calamities. N number of checks, guys, I would say. Once it satisfies all these assessments, then only they will pick such location for setting up these data centers. Okay, so it basically a data center basically actual unit which basically hosts all your hardware. Okay, your enterprise storage, networking, firewall, everything will come there. The storage devices, the networking cables, okay, the firewalls, everything will be there. Okay, the data centers support the redundant power, cooling, and internet connections. Okay, do remember they won't share same power connection, same cooling, okay, and same internet connection. No, they never share the same power, cooling, and internet connection. They have their own connections basically. All power, cooling, internet for each data center they are separate, so that failure to one common connection should not cause failure to all the data centers. Okay, that's why they have their own. That's why even if one data center fails, other will be up and running without any problems. Okay. Uh, as I already said, there's a physical security controls throughout the data center. Okay. There will be security personnel. You should have your ID card. Okay. If you are working for that data center, no other people will be allowed to get into that site. Okay. So lot of things, guys. I think there is a book on data centers itself. That itself becomes a big subject of study. So I don't want to delve into that. Okay. So there is also a concept of data center effectiveness. That means how much effectively that data center is being used. Okay. If that number is one, then it is really, or I would say its usage effective is really good. But if it is more than that, then the data center is actually taking lot of power, I would say. Okay. It's making use of a lot of other resources. So most of the time the data center people they thrive to achieve a usage effectiveness of number one. Okay, just for your information, because that's also a big subject of study. Okay, so that's what comes to the conclusion how an Azure architecture basically on a high level. You have a geography, the country, region. Okay, you divide the country, or you basically, yeah, divide a geography by regions like north, south, east, west, central, like that. Okay, and then each region contains the availability zones. Okay, and inside availability zones, basically you have your data centers. Again, region pairing, with the region pairing, okay, using a low latency WAN network, you connect them so that any kind of failure to region, one region, okay, the other region is not hampered, and basically you will be able to continue with the available other region. Okay, and same applies for the availability zones also. Okay, we can achieve the zonal and the zone redundant replication of our data. Okay, and when it comes to data centers, as I already explained, they have their own power, network, and cooling mechanism, so failure to one shouldn't cause failure to other data centers. Okay, guys, I hope which is pretty much clear for you people how Azure infrastructure looks like, or a high level Azure architecture. Okay, there are some important things like, yeah, sustainability projects. Okay, so sustainability project is basically what Microsoft does is, for example, if I go here. Okay, so, okay, these projects provide Microsoft with renewable energy certificates, okay, international RECs, guarantees of origin, a power purchase agreement. So, for example, if one of the region is near to any windmill, okay, a windmill or a wind-based power generation plant, then what happens is Microsoft basically makes an agreement with the government in order to purchase the complete. I think I have seen some examples, the 100% energy produced by that power plant basically, or the windmill. Okay, so this way they also support the geographical or the country's government by providing business for their power projects also. Okay, they support wind, solar, and mixed basically. Okay, so there are examples you can basically study on the internet. So that's all about this, guys. Thank you for listening. Okay, I think I have covered the most important steps. Okay, so yeah, thank you for listening and have a nice day.